Recently we had Australia Day on the 26th of January, which commemorated the arrival of the First Fleet in 1788, sent by the British to colonise the continent. There were the usual calls to have it changed because for Australian Aboriginals it's not something that they would want to celebrate, which is understandable. The day was also denounced by many as Invasion Day, along with the demonstrations against it and with the usual attacks on statues of Captain James Cook, who claimed the land as British but had nothing to do with colonisation, let alone invasion. But in more recent times, there has been an alarming rise in the use of the word genocide when referring to the arrival of the Europeans. Now, if you even partake in the festivities, you are somehow celebrating genocide. But that is a total distortion of the history of this country, all for a divisive political agenda. Firstly, the word genocide is defined as the deliberate killing of a large number of people from a particular nation or ethnic group with the aim of destroying that nation or group. Now, many people blame the decline in the number of Aboriginals on the Europeans. Their population went from around an estimated 750,000 at the time of the First Fleet to about 93,000 by 1901, and that is a loss of around 87% of the population. There is no doubt that the arrival of the Europeans had a massive and dramatic effect on the indigenous population, but should we really be calling it genocide? Now, there certainly were murders, with only a small number being documented, but that number may be in the tens of thousands at most, but not hundreds of thousands. So what can account for the massive drop in population? The biggest killer was smallpox, which decimated the indigenous population. The first recorded outbreak was in April 1789, some 15 months after the arrival of the First Fleet. There were further outbreaks in 1829, 1866 and 1869. The Americas and Africa had experienced similar devastation. It particularly hit women and children the hardest, meaning some men had to share wives with others, which would have only compounded the difficulties they faced. But did the smallpox even come from the First Fleet? Well, unfortunately for the genocide narrative, no, it didn't. Historians now believe that it came from the Macassan traders who lived in modern-day Indonesia and came to Australia for treepang or sea cucumbers, which they exchanged with the Aboriginals and sold to the Chinese. As for the other diseases, they likely did come from the First Fleet, but like the current pandemic, these viruses are almost impossible to stop spreading, even with modern medicine. So one way or another, the indigenous population would have been exposed eventually. So were there any aims by anyone to destroy all the Aboriginal people? No, there weren't. There was no genocide. It was a virus, most likely not even brought by Europeans, that decimated the indigenous population. There is no doubt that the Aboriginals were subjected to some horrific treatment, which could never be justified, but it wasn't genocide. The meaning of words matters, and people shouldn't be allowed to get away with misusing them without being called out. The use of the term genocide is critical theory on the left in action. They are fomenting racial hatred from twisting history to suit a political agenda, and some people on the far left are doing that to rip the fabric of society apart, thinking that they can come along then as revolutionaries and put it all back together somehow more equitably. But they have no understanding of how society works, let alone the damage they are doing. Language is the glue that holds it all together, but without shared meaning, it all will fall apart quickly, and the consequences are dire. That's why history matters.